on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on to approval of the agenda. I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 6 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes of the November 15th, 2022 meeting. Item 4 is approval of claims. Item 5 from Human Resources. Authorization to initiate hiring process. We're
going to start the consent agenda over.
Yeah, sorry. Item 3, approval of the minutes of the November 22nd, 2022 meeting. Item 4, approval of claims. Item 5 from Human Resources, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. Get the last week. Item 6, County Treasurer, approve refund request for overpayment of taxes for parcel 894719401001 in the amount of $15,911. B, approve refund request for overpayment of taxes for parcel 894719401001 in the amount of $116. Item C is approve refund request for overpayment of taxes for parcel 884730301985 in the amount of $40. And item D is approve refund request for overpayment of taxes for parcel 884706405008 in the amount of $149.
I'd move the consent agenda.
Second, motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. That ends the consent agenda. Item 7 is from the Sheriff's Office. Approve changing job title and pay for 2 warrant clerks to correctional officers effective December 12th, 2022. Take her away.
Good evening. I've got some handouts here for the board if you want.
No, he's sick.
So when I was here a couple weeks ago, I mentioned how we were going to alter some of the hiring of the new correctional officers for the new jail since the time frame has been backed up. The sheet that you have in front of you is just an explanation of how we're staggering that hiring, and basically what we're doing is we're hiring instead of 3 at each one of those intervals, which was approved back in the budget process back in March. Option C is what was approved. Instead of hiring 3, we're hiring 2, and then you'll go down to June 1, 2023, which would be the hiring of 3 new. We're not gonna do that till that following budget year. So we still need all the positions, but for this fiscal year that we're in currently, we had approved $312,682.78. That's what the board approved back in March. With making these adjustments, the new cost is gonna be $196,000, so it's a savings of $115,805. And I'm here if you're having a hard time following where I'm at. Just the correctional officer positions. I didn't want to put too much on one agenda item and confuse things, so hopefully I don't confuse you with that piece of paper. What the agenda item tonight is, you guys had at some point last year authorized the hiring of a second warrant clerk because we were
Overrun with
we were
workload.
we were failing the DPS's requirements of getting warrants entered in a timely manner. It was opening the county and the sheriff's office up for some liability if something wasn't getting put in quick enough, and a law enforcement agency would either take action or fail to take action because it wasn't in quick enough. And so you guys were generous enough to give us a warrant clerk position, which at the time I thought would be the right thing to do because it was a It was a way to save money. The clerk that we have in there currently, or I'm sorry, the person we had doing warrants previously was a correctional officer who was assigned to do warrants. Then we added that second clerk. That got us caught up. We then were audited again by the DPS, and we failed. We didn't fail the audit because they don't have a, in the meeting that I had with them, I asked them what was an acceptable number, and they couldn't give me an acceptable number. So then if you don't have an acceptable number, how do you have a number that's not, that would be a failure? But they were not happy with the audit. And what it was, and this is from the staff meeting that I had after our meeting with DPS, when the warrants are entered, somebody is supposed to do a second look on all the entry. It takes the same amount of time to do the second look. The way we've been doing it is one of the correctional officers will try to do it when they have time. The problem is they work short almost every day in the jail, and they're busy. The other thing that we were not meeting their standard was if there are any errors, the state radio dispatchers double check that work, and they check it usually between the hours of like midnight and 6 or 7 a.m., and they will send notices to the terminal, which is located in our booking area. If they're busy and don't get the thing answered right away, then it gets sent a second notice. If that one isn't answered, a third notice, a fourth notice, and so on and so forth. And we were having, in their words, too many of them. So after meeting with the administrative, some of the administration of the jail and the people that were doing the work, the conclusion that we came up with was that when you authorized us to add another warrant clerk, which was going to take effect in June, it made more sense to me to have those warrant clerk positions be correctional officer positions for two reasons. One, they go in and out of the jail because our warrants are kept in the jail because it's staffed 24/7. And when there's a hit, they call from Texas, you can't wait hours to get it answered. It's got to be answered pretty immediately. So what I would like to do is those warrant clerk positions, which you've already authorized, I would like you to, I'm asking for your permission to change those positions to correctional officers. The difference is $8,800 per year per position. And what that will allow us to do is the second warrant clerk that would be now a correctional officer if you pass this tonight, they will work from either 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. so that they will work full-time. That will be they will be a correctional officer, but they will be assigned to our warrants division, so we won't be missing those second, third, fourth notices, and we can keep the DPS happy. The additional bonus of having them as correctional officers is we are basically hemorrhaging overtime, and what we would have now is we would have warrants correctional officers during the day and one warrant correctional officer at night. And when the jail is short, they will be the first backfill for the jail. So I figure if they do about one shift a month, it would make that $8,000 almost a wash for the year. Now with the total savings that you see here, and if you look at the very bottom, the total fiscal year 23 savings, which the fiscal year we're currently in, would be $20,355, and that's factoring in the item that I'm going to put on the agenda for next week, which is moving up the hiring date of our new jail sergeant position and our new jail lieutenant position. But again, I was, in hindsight, I would have put them both on tonight so we could have talked about all of them, but at the time I thought it was better to keep them separated.
I'd move the approval of the changing of the job title and pay of 2 warrant clerks and 2 correctional officers.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. And just to clarify again, you said they're gonna kind of be almost like flex positions, though? You said they're gonna...
Their primary responsibility will be to the warrants and handling the warrants for the sheriff's office. But having the title as correctional officer, if we couldn't put a clerk in the jail. If the jail's short and they need to hire overtime, we can't put the warrant, we couldn't put a clerk in to work the jail.
So technically, I think they're gonna be a correctional officer that helps out in warrant, though.
But their primary responsibility will be doing warrants, but because they will have that correctional officer title, and it's gonna be, Bridget Delaney will just go back from, she was a correctional officer, took the clerk position, she'll go back to now being a correctional officer, we can now put her back in the jail. And sometimes it's trial and error. We thought we were gonna save a little bit of money, and in hindsight, having her available over the last 6 months to backfill when we were short, we probably would have saved more money leaving her the way she was, and that's why I'm asking to go back. And then the new position, part of it is not just to have that new warrant clerk position be a correctional officer, but allow us to do the hiring immediately instead of waiting until June. Because when you guys approved that option C, it was to hire that warrant clerk in June. So I'm asking to change the title and the pay and allow us to do it as soon as we can legally post it and get it hired.
And then you also brought up, and I know this isn't on the agenda here, but moving up the sergeant and the lieutenant position, are you thinking like next week or what?
I'll put it on the agenda for next week, yes.
Okay.
And I'll use the same, it's just the same numbers.
And,
Go ahead.
what was the motivation then for having those hired sooner?
So that we can get the new sergeant and the new lieutenant trained and ready to go for the new jail. I'm not in a position to talk about some of the things that have been going on behind the scenes, but over hopefully the next month, I will be able to come to you with some good news, hopefully. And
That sounds good.
we're gonna need to be able to actually literally hit the ground running day one. And so we're gonna try and get everybody hired that we can, but we are going to be adding a lot of administrative duties to manage a lot of people, not just staff, but hopefully customers.
Sure. Sounds good. I guess any other questions on the item that's on the agenda? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is he still on?
What?
Matthew's still on?
Oh, Matthew, did you vote? Sorry. Okay, 4-0, sorry. All right, item 8 from Community and Economic Development, informational update about the Zoning Commission's 11/28/22 review of the county's permitting process for hazardous liquid pipelines and consideration of a zoning ordinance text amendment to address separation requirements, consultation zones, planning areas, emergency response and hazard mitigation requirements, and abandonment, discontinuance, and removal of hazardous liquid pipeline requirements, in addition to the existing conditional use permit requirements under subsections 2.02.9 and 3.03.4. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Dan Priestley, Zoning Coordinator. I'm coming to you tonight to report about last night, the November 28th Zoning Commission meeting. It lasted approximately 2 hours and 48 minutes with the entire meeting. Basically, the proposal, staff proposal was presented to the commission that looks at a particular ordinance to regulate setbacks and various other concepts such as hazard mitigation. In terms of the hazard pipelines, and staff presented a proposal with a 330-foot setback for occupied structures in kind of the residential areas, and industrial zones, commercial zones, a 50-foot setback was used. When we were charged on October 11th by the supervisors to look at this particular issue, we were charged to look at it on a data-rich basis, and staff and the commission looked and compiled a report of approximately about 45 pages, including the the ordinance that looks through different European studies and other aspects to look at the safety in terms of CO2 and the plume. And our findings pretty much come to the conclusion, I guess, that the emergency response guidebook, which is a concept that first responders use to respond to different types of disasters of hazard mitigation, the first initial response is the 330 feet. We found that as kind of a reasonable data point because typically when the hazard happens, first responders would move folks to that 330 feet. So if the setback was at that point in time, it would likely increase the response for that type of setback. The public that was present last night, we actually had to move the meeting down to this room, had about 40 or so constituents that brought up some excellent points in opposition to the installation of the pipeline. We came across quite a bit of the research as well. And as we kind of proceeded through, the zoning commissioners did bring up some concerns about how a setback would overall impact the county, kind of looking at the law of unintended consequences. For example, you'd have a corridor of 330 feet, which would likely put 660 across. And it is possible to create a status of legal nonconforming where property owners, for example, if they needed to maybe add an addition to a house or to a dwelling type of scenario, it may put them in a legal nonconforming where a variance might be required if that was not put into place. So those were kind of some of the concerns that the commissioners came up with. It is known that there is some concepts that have been discussed about federal preemption. The Pipeline Safety Act has oftentimes been cited as the federal aspect of can a locality actually institute a setback when pipelines, a lot of times, I know, reaching back to post-World War II, instituting the natural gas pipelines. It's been a national security issue where they oftentimes talk about interstate commerce, and so much of the federal regulations really look at that federal government's role in terms of PHMSA and what their requirements are in terms of instituting a setback. So we're kind of monitoring other counties in terms of challenges of litigation as kind of part of the process. But in general, going back, the commissioners did look at this from a general public safety on how the Woodbury County resident would be impacted with this pipeline, or any type of pipeline, I should say. And going back to the basis, of course, the agenda item does cite 2.029 and 3.03.4, which are the basis of Woodbury County having a review process for the conditional use of a pipeline. And the Iowa Utilities Board does reference development plans as kind of the consideration of the placement of these items. And so that's something that we had looked at and kind of trying to look at a very comprehensive full picture of where Woodbury County is in terms of this permitting. Going back to the comp plan, a decision had to been made from 2005 to 2008 when this most recent ordinance was put into place to put the pipeline category in the ordinance and stick a conditional use permit across the board. And so that right there is a basis of some level of permitting at the local level here. In terms of companies approaching the county, it would go through kind of, what happens is a conditional use permit by itself is a catch-all process that forces staff, the zoning commission, and the Board of Adjustment to bring an all-comprehensive approach to looking at the aspect of any type of use in any constituent's yard. And so if a pipeline application were to be received, it's the duty of us as staff, as well as the zoning commission, to reach out to all of the respective stakeholders who are involved in the process to try to develop a picture to see if criteria which is in the ordinance is met. And the general criteria, which was reviewed last night among the constituents, I think it kind of brought a turning point in the meeting last night. To kind of describe the meeting, we presented the setbacks, and then we started mentioning more and more about what the conditional use permit itself entails. And that is an applicant having to really lay out the nature and the impact of how this type of concept or application would fit within their respective backyards. So kind of reasoning through looking at either the federal preemption, the Iowa Utilities Board's aspect of citing and collecting the comments and seeing how a respective pipeline can come through a community. The commissioners ended up looking at the conditional use permit as their primary choice in terms of a recommendation. So they had recommended sticking with the conditional use process that we have on hand, concerned about some of the laws of unintended consequences of instituting that type of regulation, but yet remaining open to further direction possibly. But as a result of that meeting last night, they were more on board with the scrutiny that goes with the zoning commission level and the Board of Adjustment level through that process.
Go ahead.
So if that's the case, does the conditional use permit as it relates to pipelines need any sort of action by this board?
Under the conditional use process, it is a zoning commission and Board of Adjustment function. What we had mentioned in the past is one area where the supervisors could possibly support the zoning commission and the Board of Adjustment would be maybe a resolution of possible questions that we could ask the companies that are directly related to our criteria for the ordinance. And that is very key to the approval of a conditional use, because one of the authorities that the Board of Adjustment have is if they identify an area that is a bit insufficient, that can't meet a criteria, they have condition authority. And they can institute conditions into a Board of Adjustment resolution, which would have the force.
Can I interrupt you? But I think he's getting at is what do, like, in order to continue with the conditional use process that's there, do we have to do anything as a Board of Supervisors?
As a Board of Supervisors, you would not be part of that equation.
So like, we don't have to take any action necessarily, is what
Under the
what he's getting at.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
The simple question is, yeah, there is no involvement from the Board of Supervisors.
So I guess any questions from anybody out there on the update, or? You got anything, Doyle?
I just had something I wanted to add, but you're not done, go ahead.
I think we're done.
Okay. Doyle Turner, 2738 200th Street, Mobile. The meeting was really remarkable. The crowd really wanted more restriction than what they thought they were getting in what the staff was recommending. And you could see a shift in the public as it was explained how this worked. And you could just, they felt like they could be represented. And I think we have to give a lot of credit to Mr. Priestley and the members for explaining their positions. It's rare that you see a crowd because this touches at home to people, and it's rare that you see a crowd kind of pivot away from their original standing. So I think that means a lot. The one other thing that I'd like to point out, afterwards, I looked at the Iowa code, and if you look at, I believe it's 471C, 476.1C, the authority for the Iowa Utility Board is really not specifically directed toward pipelines, but utilities with pipelines. And it specifically says that gas public utilities having fewer than 2,000 customers are not subject to the regulation authority of the utility board under this chapter. We all know that they're gonna need eminent domain in order to finish something like this. And I think they're trying to skate under under the law, really, to get regulated by the Iowa Utilities Board in order to get eminent domain. And I'd just like to make you aware that I think there is a possibility that we can legally stop the Iowa Utilities Board from even hearing this. So that's just what I wanted to pass on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Anybody from the board, anything else? All right. Moving on to item 9, report on committee meetings. Not expecting a whole lot with Thanksgiving last week. Any?
We have Rolling Hills budgetary meeting tomorrow. I'll be reporting back. I expect that to be a lengthy meeting. And just want to echo, I know we're on to the next agenda item, but from the board's perspective, thank you, Dan, for shepherding the process, for the information that doesn't go lost on us. And thank you for all the time and effort and obvious research that you put into it.
Anything in Vietnam that came up for Grant Township? Well, thank you, Chairman. I had nothing last. Citizen concern, round 2. All right, board concerns.
Just wanted to make sure Tuesday at 10 a.m. Is that something that we
Tuesday,
can?
10, oh, that's the conference board. I do intend to be there.
I cannot.
Okay, and you can't. And Matthew, are you gonna be back on Tuesday? All right, well, hopefully I can get Justin.
I think it was mentioned we need 2.
Yeah, we gotta have 2, and Craig Anderson won't be there.
I
From
am gonna
Plymouth,
be in
so-
Plain.
All right, so,
What time will it be in Vietnam at 10 a.m. on Tuesday?
well, like I said, I'll try to get Justin there, and if not, then I'll figure out, we're gonna have to probably call somebody.
If you want to call collect.
Yeah. Do you have anything else, or Rocky, did you have anything?
I do not.
All right, Matthew, anything over there? All right, we also have the holiday luncheon. What do we call that? That's what we call it, right? Yes. That's at 11 to 1? Correct. Yep, on Tuesday. And then also, and I don't know if you got a list of people emailing you, you know, as far as the group that was at the meeting yesterday. We desperately need people on this commission to assess damages for DOT right-of-way acquisition. I don't even know if I said that right.
Acquisition.
That's what I meant to say. I don't know. I don't know what came out. In the category A, owners of ag property. So, and I don't know how we get the word out any better. I know we brought it up probably the 5th time now. I brought it up on the radio, and we haven't had anybody.
Joshua, was that something that you had mentioned is going to become increasingly important?
I believe so, yes, because that commission would be potentially called upon if there's ever an eminent domain action, whether that's DOT or something that was approved by the Iowa Utilities Board. So it's important that there's a pool of people to draw from if that ever was the case. DOT does have some actions occasionally, so I mean, we always need people, but yes, I think that it's important now that we have those people.
Well, the DOT is supposed to have a hearing this spring, and we only have one name under category A currently, and so we need more. I don't know, she ever put a number in any of the emails to you?
We need 7 in each category.
Oh, okay.
I just wonder the pool of people that were there the other night, that if what Josh was just explaining to us was explained to them, even if it was an email out to that group to say, these are some of the repercussions in a way that you may be able to help from a neighborly perspective, if we might find some interest. I don't know what you think about the appropriateness of that.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the function of that commission is purely to determine the value of the property. So they don't have a say in whether eminent domain is utilized or the extent of it, but they help determine value. And the way the commission is set up, there's people from different walks of life that would have input on appropriate value.
Is that something you think may be possible, Dan?
We did get quite a list, so we have some.
I just think of people who are willing to show up and have their concerns heard on a Monday night, if they're willing to do that, maybe there's interest to be able to fairly assess the images should something happen and say, well, this is what we think a fair market value is.
Well, and then there are different categories too. I think A, B, C, D, wasn't there? I don't even remember. I went through my last email and it just said explicitly category A is what's needed for their hearing, but I think we, at a maximum, had 3 in one of the categories, but most of them were 1 or 2. So I don't know how we find people unless we just start randomly mailing people and tell them they won an opportunity to be on the commission to assess damages. Other than that, I don't have anything else, so we're adjourned. You have been selected.